Yeah, that's a wizard. 100%.
Calling the game right now. Dressed like the Michelin Man, ready to get my on.
A really good team that shouldn't have been.
7 different teams won conference championships.
U of A, not one of them. I just wanted to point that out.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. We're just going to get right into it because I messed up the intro. Screw it. We're talking about Boris Becker today, one of the greatest tennis players of his era, probably the best German of his era. I'll say
German,
that.
Yeah. He's a German sports hero. What was his name? Franz Beckenbauer.
Yeah, no, seriously. He had that like Beatles mania in Germany, especially when he was young and winning. That's what people were saying was just like, oh, yeah.
He came out of the gate guns blazing.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. And did it at a very young age, too.
Yes.
That's what I found so fascinating researching this. But born November 22nd, 1967 in Baden-Württemberg, West Germany. I believe the town is Lumen? Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah. To Elvira and Karl-Heinz Becker. Was raised a Catholic. His dad was an architect who founded the tennis center in town.
And we see this happening a lot with these kids from this era where, like, if their dad wasn't, like, kind of putting them into this, they really didn't get that practice. And he definitely got all the practice he needed when he was younger.
And tennis is one of those, like, specialized sports. You know, it's not... it's not like baseball where you can just have a sandlot game, you know, like there aren't just tennis courts littered everywhere like there are baseball fields at parks, you know. You can't play a pickup tennis game very rarely.
You really need a court that's really, and you need a lot of like upkeep for it.
And it's not a sport for the economically disadvantaged either.
No, you got to keep rackets going. So that gets us right into him being a youth player.
Yeah.
And even back then, he had horrible temper tantrums where he would break rackets, where he would yell at people, where like he would just go completely red in the face kind of thing.
That ball is on the line.
Exactly. And this is throughout his entire career.
Yeah.
He was like this. And we were talking right before the podcast, the punishment that he would get when he would like have these temper tantrums was he would have to play the youth women's or whatever, the youth girls' best player, who was Steffi Graf at the time. And they ended up like growing up and playing against each other in this youth Germany kind of thing.
I don't want to play her. She beats the crap out of me.
Well, like you were saying, the punishments in Germany, they change over the years.
Yes,
That's
they
all
do.
I'm saying. But it was one of these things where he said it was like originally a punishment, and then he realized how good she was, and they was like extra training, essentially. And that's why I think both of them really come out of the gates blazing.
Yeah, in 1974, he joined FC Blau-Weiß in Lyman. Lyman, the name of the town, coached by a man named Boris Broskvar. And by 1977, he was on the junior team for Baden Tennis Association.
And that's when he's 10.
Yeah.
Just to put it in perspective, like they were in this tennis, like they were seeing that he could really become something that was great because I think he was playing with kids who are like 12 at this point.
I mean, he probably doesn't have any fur on his peaches yet.
No, not at all.
He won the South German Championship, which was the first German youth tennis tournament.
Oh.
I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah.
In 1978, he's named to the top German junior team and was put on the team for a cost of 1.3 million Deutschmarks. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a ton of money for a youth, you know.
It's a lot.
I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, 1.3 million anything is a lot.
Well, I just mean, especially for the era, all of that. It seems like they saw that he had potential to be one of the best tennis players and possibly the best tennis player in Germany. I think that's what all of this kind of leading up.
11.
Yeah, he just like keeps winning these youth tourneys and like they're financially backing him. So it's interesting. For an 11-year-old, I find it to be, you know.
By the time he was 14 or 13 in 1981, he's on the first German men's national team.
Yep.
In the National Federation. And then 1982, we won the doubles at the Orange Bowl International Tennis Championships. So, yeah, 14, 15 years old. Oh, I'm just going to go win some tennis tournaments against men, grown men.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But 1984, he turns pro. So 16, 17 years old, he's a pro tennis player, which you don't see very often.
No, not at all. And especially in America where you can kind of get into the school system and all of that. But even in Europe, you weren't seeing guys go pro until they were 18, 19, 20, when they were really had a couple of like years under their belt of this. And he already had that. That's the thing that I find interesting is like he started so early that now that he's 16, 17, he's like ready to go.
Yeah, he had a Romanian-born coach, Gunter Bosch, and Ion Tiriac was one of his trainers, and he won his first pro doubles title that year in Munich.
Yeah.
1985, he won the Young Masters title, and was the first German of a top-level singles title at the Queen's Club, I believe, that year. So, but 1985 is his year.
And then I was going to say 2 weeks after his Queen's Club victory, he's still in England.
Yeah.
And this was the thing is he becomes the first unseeded player to win Wimbledon. And
That's amazing.
And he does it at 17 years old.
It's like because he's not even seeded. You can't even talk about like that'd be like an NIT team being thrown into the mix and running the table in the NCAA tournament.
And that was something that he said was a lot of people were telling him before, like, oh, you did great to get to the semis. This is going to be it. And he kept saying, like, why are we talking about me losing?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about me losing until I lose. And that was the mentality that he really took into this Wimbledon. Like, there's no reason why I can't win. And he goes on and shows that he is one of the better indoor players or grass players.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting that it happens so quick.
Well, he was the first German to win a Grand Slam title.
Yep.
He was the youngest to win a Grand Slam title until Michael Chang in 1989 at Wimbledon. And 2 weeks later, he won the Cincinnati Open after Wimbledon.
I actually found this interesting. So after he won the Cincinnati Open, he said there was like a break, and his parents were like, hey, this tennis thing is cool, but you need to get back into school and get a real career going.
And how are you going to tell that to a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid?
Well, like, just to think of, like, after winning Wimbledon and 2 tourneys, nowadays he would have been a multi-millionaire.
He'd have been on the cover of every magazine. He'd be getting all these ridiculous endorsements, like the Norm Macdonald joke about Kobe Bryant. Screw it, who needs college anyway?
It's true, though, but the money wasn't so crazy then that his parents were like, hey, this is fun, but you might want to think of something else. And he really comes into this era of the money coming in.
Don't be a fool. Stay in the school.
Because, when he goes home, that was the thing, was when he goes home, he really becomes this icon that we see, this Germany. Because, like you were saying, the first German tennis player to ever win a slam. And he's young. He's, like, handsome.
I know, He's the playboy.
He's the playboy.
Era. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
1986, defended his Wimbledon title, beating Ivan Lendl in straight sets. So he just goes right back to England.
I thought that was pretty ridiculous. The back-to-back is just insane. And like I was saying, he's just so dominant on grass and or indoor.
Well, you were talking about his style of play earlier, and I think that kind of benefited it, right, Chris?
Yeah, because he's not like a baseline player. He definitely charges the net and plays like cross-court kind of shit. And we see it later where he starts playing baseline players, and it's kind of detrimental because he tries to, and I swear to God, it's in the German personality, where he's just like, I'm going to beat you like you want me, or like you want to beat me. It's such, because people are saying, especially later on against like Agassi, he was really playing into the game strategy that Agassi was laying out.
Exactly. And he wouldn't stop. He couldn't get out of his own way.
Because literally they were just like, just charge the net. Just charge the net. You can just charge it. And he just like couldn't do it. He would stay back baseline and pretty much tire himself out. That's the one thing that people talk about is his game strategy could have won him some more slams.
And he won plenty of slams, though. So not to take anything
away. No,
it's
one of those things where he's one of the best ever. But like, if there's any kind of, which is kind of crazy to even say, but if there's any kind of like takeaway from his game was that he would get locked into these baseline battles with guys who trained for
were
that.
better than him at that aspect when he could have he played on their terms instead of making them play on his or trying
Exactly.
to counter. 1987, while he lost in the second round in Wimbledon, in the Davis Cup match, he played a very famous one against John McEnroe.
Oh, yeah.
And it is the longest tennis match, one of the longest ones ever. It lasted 6 hours and 22 minutes. It went 4-6, 15-13, 8-10, 6-2, and 6-2. But 15-13 and 8-10?
Yeah.
My God.
That's why it literally took 6 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah. Like, you usually see just sixes across the board.
Yeah.
15 and 13 and 8 and 10. Oh, boy.
That's almost 3 matches.
It really is.
Like,
the
it's
18,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or the
15.
15, yeah, almost. Made the Wimbledon final in 1988.
Again, so just to
yeah.
put it out, like he 3 out of the 4 Wimbledon finals, he ends up losing this one.
Yeah, to Stefan Edberg in 4 sets. That was kind of a rivalry that he had throughout the 80s.
They were
with
saying
Edberg,
that this
yeah.
was his big counterpart.
And it was very clash of styles, clash of personalities, because Becker was very animated. Edberg was very stoic.
Yep.
And almost like McEnroe and Bjorn Borg earlier in the 80s.
But we see him actually beating him in the World Championship. So he lost to him in Wimbledon, but then came back later that year and won his first World Championship.
Yeah. 1988 also helped West Germany, because that wall still hasn't come down yet. Win the Davis Cup for the first time, obviously. Beat Andre Agassi in the semis that year, and was Player of the Year on the ATP Tour. So,
But this is something that is so interesting with tennis. He never finished the year as number 1.
no, never finished it. He was there, but he never finished it.
Yeah.
1989 wins a slam that's not Wimbledon. He wins the U.S. Open.
This is his first and only time of winning 2 slams in 1 year. Mm-hmm. So he goes and wins the U.S. Mm-hmm. and then
Beats Edberg at Wimbledon.
Yep.
So he gets revenge on him. Yeah.
it was actually, I thought it was interesting. He actually lost to Edberg in the French Open that year.
He did, yeah, in the semifinals.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So that's what people were saying, was this rivalry was so, like, whoever's winning these, they're literally one of these 2 guys and they're beating each other.
they're beating each other, and the winner is usually the winner of that tournament.
Yep.
1990, Edberg comes back, though, and beats him at Wimbledon in a very good 5-set final. This is when we start seeing the rise of Andre Agassi, so go listen to that episode. He lost to Agassi in the U.S. Open semifinals. But he wins another slam event, and he wins the 1991 Aussie Open,
Yep.
which is pretty goddamn incredible.
Well, it's not the court that he's best at, I feel like.
No.
So that's why people were saying that, because he never ends up winning on clay.
Yeah.
But everybody sees how unbelievably great he is on grass, because he just keeps making these Wimbledon finals.
Yeah. And he was ranked after this number 1, and ranked for 12 weeks, I believe. So he never finished as number 1 for a year, but he is ranked number 1 at various points of his career.
And this is 91, where he loses to the other German, right?
Yeah, Michael Stitch.
Michael Stitch.
Stitch.
Which I thought was interesting, because they had a huge kind of rivalry, and then the Olympics come around,
and they play in the doubles, and they win the gold.
It's
in
such
Barcelona,
it's such a German thing, where people are saying, like, oh man, they hate each other, all of this, and then they team up and they were amazing as doubles.
I don't like you, but
Yeah.
we can win.
But I want the gold.
It's so pretty, the gold medal, yeah. 1992, he won 7 titles, the ATP Tour Championship over Jim Courier in 4 sets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's on top of the world, and you have to think this guy's 24, 25 years old. Like, the amount of tennis you would think this guy has left in the tank, when we look at some of the most dominant tennis players ever, it's like, he could do it.
For another decade.
Yeah, he could do it for another decade, but
we see some
things
of his
start to unravel a bit.
Yeah,
for
some of his
Boris.
and this is what kind of sucks, and we talked about this with other athletes, was it's not the game. It's not like something like an injury, or something happens. It's
Well,
like
he started to get injured around this time, but it's
his
not,
personal life
Yeah.
that starts to leak into this, and he really takes a huge dip in performance for about 2 years.
Well, you got all that other stuff that's not. Tennis is hard enough to focus on. The other stuff coming into play only is more kerosene on the dumpster fire.
So in '93, he tries to essentially marry this woman.
Yeah.
And during this, the Germans are looking at him for tax evasion.
Yes, they are.
And
Barbara Feldhaus.
I was just trying to look at her name.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's interesting because he has all of this personal stuff going on where the German media, after loving him for like 5 years, is really vilifying him. He's marrying this half-black woman, and there's underlining racism going on.
Oh,
Europe. There's all kinds of bullshit because she's like half African, half French, or I forget exactly what she is, but there's all kinds of this stuff going on where it's huge amounts of backlash coming for him.
It became fashionable. When you reach the top, people just want to take you down.
And that's straight up what happened to him. The tax evasion stuff.
That'll come back into play later. Yep. Reached the Wimbledon final in 1995, but lost to Pete Sampras. And this is the rise of Sampras and Agassi.
And this is the time that I wanted to talk about this because he played Agassi in the semifinals, and they said that he baselined him.
Yeah.
But he beat him, but he went in to play Sampras in the finals, and he was so dead. And Sampras even said this. It was like he was playing against a different player because they play each other like the next year. And Sampras has this absolutely wonderful quote where he says, "Boris Becker is the greatest indoor player I've ever played," which you think about this game they had at Wimbledon where he dominated him in straight sets.
Yep.
And then he comes back the next year and he's just like, no, that's the best player on indoor that I've ever played.
Well, yeah, because that Agassi was a match was a marathon.
It was a
just
marathon.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, he had nothing left to give,
and that's
or not his 100% to give.
Yes.
But 95, he does win the ATP championship.
Yeah.
Over Michael Chang, and wins the Queen's Club. And
again,
also the Aussie Open over Chang. So, I mean, he's still playing good tennis, but you can finally start seeing, cracks in his career.
Yep. And then we see him in 96.
Yeah, when he beat Sampras in the Stuttgart Masters.
Yep.
Yeah, and
that's when
Sampras's quote.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then going into Wimbledon in 96, everybody was saying, like, here's the resurgence. He's going to make the final again. How are you going to beat him? And then I think in the third round, he he injures his right wrist.
Yep.
And that starts another decline like we were talking about where the injuries start to come in.
Yeah, this is when it's not just the off the court stuff. This is like on the court, and that's the tragic thing. He's 30 years old.
Yeah.
He's 30 years old.
And this is something else. Maybe he has the wear on his body of somebody that's been playing up into their 35, 36. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but he lived such an interesting young sprint of 7, 8 years of him being the best.
Because by 1999, his career is over.
It's over.
Yeah, it's like a shooting star almost.
Yeah.
And it's like when I was reading about him, I'm just kind of confused. I'm like, why is this guy not bigger? He should be in the conversation of one of the best guys, and he is in the conversation.
He
but
is.
I mean, his name doesn't come off the top of your head.
I'll say this because the era right after him, the guys would win all of the slams.
That's true, yeah.
And and this is one of the sadder moments in his career.
Open, yeah.
In 95, he was playing in the French Open, and he was up 2-0 and double faulted on his match point tiebreaker, and then proceeded to lose the next 3 matches. So literally he's posed to win this Grand Slam he's never won.
Yeah.
And then literally it just tanks. And it's one of those things where if he had won if he had won all the slams, maybe we would be saying a little bit more about him.
I think you're right. Yep. I think you're right.
And then with the tax evasion, I feel like in Germany, he has this kind of backlash because the way the tax evasion worked, he said he was living in Monaco.
Yeah.
And it was obvious he was living in Munich the whole time.
Yeah.
So he wasn't paying their taxes. And then he tried to get out of this tax evasion thing so many times in so many different ways that people were just kind of done with that.
Yeah.
His kind of antics because it was not.
It's like, bro, don't Wesley Snipes this.
Yeah.
Come on.
Like I said, he married this woman who was half African. He tried to say that he was the sports ambassador, and I forget.
Oh yeah, to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yeah. He was basically just trying to cut corners
Yeah.
and just like be like, I didn't do it. I didn't do this. And it's like, you should have just said it from the beginning, and it would all been over.
The Republic of Congo came out and they were like, okay, we officially don't have that position.
Yeah.
And it was so funny
Position
because
doesn't exist.
Yeah. And then he was just like, shit. And then I think in 2003, they ended up convicting him on this tax evasion. It was a 2-year suspended sentence, and I think he ended up paying like €500,000 or $500,000 Deutschmarks.
Probably euros.
I forget which one, yeah.
I mean, there would have been in the euro equivalent of whatever a Deutschmark was at the time. But this is how good he was, though. I wanted
to put that in, and then we'll get into his overall stats because he really was a fantastic.
49 singles titles, 15 doubles titles, 6 Grand Slams, 2003 International Tennis Hall of Fame, 54-12 in the Davis Cup, 38-3 in singles. That's amazing.
And he had 3 world championships too. So
and a gold medal.
And a gold medal in doubles. And that gold medal, I want to point this out. That gold medal was actually won on clay. Yeah. So he just didn't put it together on clay.
It didn't do it in the French Open.
Yep.
And that's
and that's that one time where you hear about it, that one takeaway where he had it literally in his grasp and he let it go, I bet was probably the worst.
Oh yeah. That's his laces out moment.
Post-career, he actually coached for a little bit.
Yeah, he coached Novak Djokovic, who was one of the guys we were talking about who have all the slams, like who have every event locked down.
I thought it was interesting. Boris Becker was talking with him, and he asked him to coach. Djokovic asked him if he wanted to be his coach, and his response immediately was, why? So, like, Boris Becker's had this, like, it wasn't like, yes, of course I'm going to do that. It was like, why? What would I do to help you? And he was talking about how he needed to be more focused at that top level.
Yeah.
And I think they won 6 slams in the span of 3 years, which is, it's crazy.
Yep. And one of which was a French Open, I should bring up. But yeah. Also had some issues with the bankruptcy.
Yep.
Yeah. The bankruptcy and finances and stuff like that.
Well, it felt like he's been kind of shady with his finances his whole life. So this company says that he owes them something like $14 million.
Yep.
He files for bankruptcy, but he still owns like 8 apartments across Europe.
He's like basically that guy who gets a divorce but starts hiding his assets and not being necessarily forthright in how much money he's actually worth.
Yes.
And
it seems to happen all throughout his life.
Yeah, this isn't like this isn't a one-off. It's like a recurring theme financially for him throughout his life. So just very. He had the issue with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Got a legal passport, detained for possible fraud.
Yeah, no, he's getting into some shit. I'm just saying. And this is recent. This is in the past 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. So it's definitely, people are starting to kind of look at him in a different light.
When he did the commentary for Wimbledon, you'd think he'd just make that natural transition, because he worked for the BBC and everything, and it'd just be like, oh, he's a happy guy. But no, there's always this like kind of dark cloud hanging over him for not tennis stuff.
Yeah.
Because in 2019 they extended his bankruptcy 12 more years, the restrictions. So not till 2031 he'll have to pay off 4.5 million pounds. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's not drugs, it's not women, it's literally money that has this guy kind of has this weird cloud over him, like you were saying, and he is one of the best tennis players of his era. So
nicknamed him Boom Boom.
Yeah, I love that.
Just a very powerful guy, Baron von Slam, Boris Becker. That's what I mean. It's like when I read about him, I'm thinking this is going to be really cool. It's all going to be about tennis, and then no,
a lot of it was about tax fraud.
Yeah,
tax evasion.
Tax evasion. Yeah. But thank you for listening, everyone, to the Sports Experience podcast. You can find me on social media at DiTolla Dominic and Chris over here at Quinn Comedy. And we're always recording here at Engle Studio. And that's the social media account for where all of your recording needs and